I just want to go to sleep and not wake up.
Confessions from Miss K you won't hear on Duck Dynasty.
He did do some physical abuse.
And why she stood by her man.
I'm convinced that if I hadn't stayed with him, he would be dead.
Plus, a shocking report about the state of marriage in our country.
That is a big deal to know.
Get the real truth behind divorce rates on today's 700 Club.
It's like you can see hope coming back into their eyes.
Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Let's go over to the CBN News Desk for today's top headlines.
Gordon, the Islamic State terror group, is celebrating Thursday's shooting in Tennessee that killed 4 U.S. Marines. ISIS followers hailed the act on Twitter. As George Thomas reports, the 24-year-old man who carried out the terrorist attack was inspired by Islam and longed for death.
The FBI is now trying to find out if Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz was inspired by ISIS propaganda online. His former high school wrestling coach is stunned at his actions.
He seemed kind of serious, but the more that I had him in class, he turned out to be just a cut-up. I mean, he was a joker all the time.
In the last year, ISIS has been urging followers in America to attack military facilities, police officers and soldiers. The Kuwaiti-born man was reportedly motivated by Islam, writing in a blog that this life is short and bitter and that Muslims should not let the opportunity to submit to Allah pass you by. In another post, Abdulaziz writes, "We ask Allah to make us follow their path and to know what role we need to play to establish Islam in the world."
What we are increasingly seeing are individuals who may be motivated by the ideology of a terrorist group, may be inspired by their social media campaigns, but are acting independent of those terrorist organizations.
The chaos erupted Thursday morning when the heavily armed 24-year-old college student went on a shooting rampage, first at this armed forces recruitment center.
He just pulled up, and next thing you know, he lifted up his arms like this with a big black gun, and just, it was one shot, and then it was just endless shots.
Minutes later, racing in a convertible to this Naval Reserve Center, where he shot and killed 4 Marines. For now, authorities are treating this as an act of domestic terror.
We understand as a community what it takes to heal. We're thankful for those who are home safely, and we will certainly give a prayer in all of our hearts for those who aren't.
Thursday night, residents of the city gathered in churches praying for peace.
Sometimes you don't have the words to say, you really don't, but just to be there for people and to let people know that we're here, we love you, and we're supporting you.
Abdulaziz was not on any U.S. terror list. While authorities believe he acted alone, the FBI is now combing through his computers and online activities to see if he has any foreign terror connections. Meanwhile, security is being stepped up across the country at military recruiting sites. George Thomas, CBN News.
Ohio, Georgia, and Indiana are launching investigations into Planned Parenthood to find out if organs from aborted fetuses have been sold. Several congressional committees are also investigating the nation's largest abortion provider. This week, a pro-life group released a video showing a Planned Parenthood official discussing monetary estimates for organs. Planned Parenthood says it does not sell fetal body parts. Well, thousands of babies in waiting currently sit in frozen storage in labs and clinics across America. In most cases, they're left over from fertility treatments. Before a California couple, the circumstances surrounding their frozen embryos are more complicated. Caitlin Burke reports.
In 2010, Mimi Lee found out she had cancer. She and her then husband, Stephen Finley, decided to freeze 5 embryos because the cancer treatment would make her infertile.
When a couple chooses to freeze their embryos, they're stored in cryotanks like these. There's no limit on how long an embryo can be frozen. Some have even been stored for more than 15 years and still resulted in successful pregnancies.
5 years after first freezing their embryos, however, Lee and Finley are in court fighting over what should be done with them. The couple divorced in April, and now he wants those embryos destroyed, and she wants to keep them.
She's very emotional. This is her last chance to have a biological child.
Finley says he doesn't want to have a child outside of marriage, and that Lee is bound by forms signed at the fertility clinic calling for the embryos to be destroyed in the event of a divorce. Lee's attorney is arguing that she has a constitutional right to procreate, and that the forms were not a binding contract.
They checked off the boxes, they were done. They were newlyweds. They had no idea, they weren't even thinking about divorce at that point in time.
The ruling in this case could set a national precedent. In previous cases, the party opposed to keeping the embryos has won. But there have been exceptions for women like Lee, who have had cancer and are now infertile. If Lee loses her battle in court, there is another option for the embryos. Organizations like Nightlight Christian Adoption Agency have programs that allow couples to adopt frozen embryos that would otherwise be destroyed.
We believe that life begins at conception, which means as soon as the embryo is created. And for many of these, or for these embryos, they've been placed in frozen storage, and that process of developing, being born, growing into adulthood has been halted and interrupted.
A ruling from the San Francisco County Superior Court judge is expected over the next several weeks. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
TLC is dropping 19 kids and counting. This comes after revelations the oldest Duggar son, Josh, molested 5 children, including 4 of his sisters when he was a teenager. TLC hopes to shift attention from the scandal with a documentary on child sex abuse. Jill and Jessa Duggar will be in it. The Duggars say they hope it brings hope to victims of child sex abuse. We hope that you will stay with us for more of the 700 Club right after this.
Well, you've heard it said over and over, half of all marriages end in divorce, and things are just as bad in the church as the rest of the country. Well, there's just one problem with that so-called fact. It isn't true, and that can have a dramatic impact on keeping marriages together. Paul Strand brings us the story.
Harvard-trained researcher Shanti Feldhahn decided to tackle long-held beliefs about divorce to hopefully right some wrongs. She says just the idea that it's as bad in the church as the rest of the world can demoralize Christians.
For a pastor, it means all my work doesn't mean very much. You know, for the average person in a congregation, there's this subtle feeling like, if that's true, if on something as important as marriage, doing what the Bible says doesn't change anything, what does that mean about the Bible?
Virginia pastor Daniel Floyd sees how this can hurt the faith.
Because the 50% divorce rate inside the church really just said the church makes no difference in your marriage. And that's quite an indictment on the church.
Christian psychotherapist Angel Davis says the belief half of all marriages fail can even give people permission to give up.
When you have like a statistic like 50%, it gives you the option. It's like becomes an option in your mind.
Feldhahn spent 8 years investigating the real numbers, and in her book, The Good News About Marriage, lays out what she found. First, the divorce rate is way below 50% and much lower for those who attend church. Feldhahn estimates the overall divorce rate for the country is around 31%. And she says the studies of people who regularly go to church all show a much lower divorce rate for them.
Maybe 15%, maybe 20% for all marriages. First marriages, second marriages, third marriages. Pastors need to know this. People need to be able to look around the average congregation and say, you know what, most of these people will have strong and happy marriages for a lifetime. Doing what God says matters. That is a big deal to know.
Feldhahn cites one example where a pastor tracked 143 couples who he had married.
It was 25, 27 years later, less than 10% had been divorced.
Therapist Davis says this could go a long way to erasing the doubt that Christianity makes no difference.
That there's no power in it to transform, and that is just not true. So those statistics, I think, could help a lot with that belief.
Pastor Floyd believes it'll be a major plus for the faith when this new knowledge gets around.
But if you have regular church attendance, then it's going to make a difference in the longevity of your marriage. I think that is incredible firepower, so to speak, for the local church, for the pastor.
Feldhahn says she's seen the power of this new information when she shares it to immediately pump up a congregation's faith.
You hear this gasp go through the congregation because and everybody starts applauding, and it's like you can see hope coming back into their eyes.
Shanti's husband Jeff says such hope can be crucial in helping a couple actually survive.
I mean, Shanti and I have had tough patches, but we never once thought that we weren't going to make it. We knew we were going to. So you work through the tough patches and you move on to the other side, and the other side is always good.
Feldhahn says people can make other choices to divorce-proof their marriage. An example?
People who decide not to live together before they get married. That has been proven to have a really good effect on the marriage. And so you might get down into the 5–10% divorce odds.
Now Feldhahn and others hope people will spread the word.
To be able to get this information into other people's hands quickly, I really think we can change the paradigm from discouragement to hope.
Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Atlanta.
Well, that's some good news for a change, and I hope it gives you hope for your marriage. I don't know of any marriage that hasn't gone through difficulty. It's tough, and it's tough raising children in today's world. And it's tough raising grandchildren. But what hope that if you stick with it, there's joy on the other side. Well, we've got a story for you that will encourage you on this, and it's from the matriarch of the Duck Dynasty clan. She's going to share what saved her marriage after years of abuse.
Alan said, Mom, don't cry anymore. He said, God's going to take care of us. It was like a light. You turned on the light.
Hear why Kay fought for her marriage when we come back.
If you're one of the millions who watches Duck Dynasty, you probably already know that the family wasn't always happy, happy, happy. But there is another side to their story you don't hear about on the show. Reporter Michelle Wilson traveled to the Robertson home in West Monroe, Louisiana for a visit with Miss Kay.
Every week, millions tune in to watch A&E's hit reality series, Duck Dynasty, while the men and their beards get most of the attention. Miss Kay, the matriarch of the family, helps keep everyone grounded. I had a chance to sit down and talk with Miss Kay, who told me about growing up in Ida, Louisiana, her marriage to Phil, and her role in the early days of the Duck Commander dynasty.
I know one thing, I'd be rolling pie dough and answer Duck Commander, and I'd have a little pad with a pencil writing things down. My kids would come in from school and sit on the floor in front of the TV and line up duck call boxes and put the stickers on the duck call and then put them in the boxes. Something smell good?
Ooh, that would make a hound dog hug a kitty cat on a frosty morning.
You are on one of the highest rated reality TV series. Your popularity is growing. Why do you think that's happening?
God is blessing us, maybe because he knows we're going to still talk about him.
Tell me about your life growing up. You started from some humble beginnings.
I did. I was a little bitty town of about 300 people out of Louisiana. Nobody's ever heard of it because when you go through, there's one red light. We're so proud of that light. My grandmother's house was just a place of comfort. I mean, I remember going in there, the kitchen always had pots cooking with the lids where I was bump, 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 bubbling, you know.
But she also said something very profound that you would carry with you for the rest of your life.
She said, one woman and one man for one life. And she said, divorce is not an option.
Phil and Kay met in high school. Phil was a quarterback, played baseball, and loved hunting. Kay was a cheerleader.
It was, for me, love at first sight. I don't know if Phil would say that or not, but I did see him and I thought, I like the way that looks. He worked in the oil field. He was a roughneck and his daddy was the driller.
Kay and Phil married. After Alan was born, Phil wasn't quite ready for the responsibility of being a father. Phil became a teacher. He also began drinking and running wild, and he had a violent temper.
I don't want anybody to stay through an abusive thing, and I had some abuse there, and so that was one thing.
Can you talk about the abuse?
It was only when he was drunk. The words were the worst. But I'm not saying that he ever didn't do anything physical, because there was a time when he drank some real moonshine, and he did do some physical abuse that time when he drank that.
Why didn't you just leave? At this point, you had gone through so much.
I guess I was a loyal person. When I made the vow to God, for better or for worse, till death do you part, I'm convinced that if I hadn't stayed with him, he would be dead.
The couple eventually had 2 more sons. Phil left teaching and started managing a bar. He continued drinking and seeing other women. Then one night, Phil came home drunk and accused Kay of cheating on him. For Kay, the abuse became unbearable.
I completely lost hope. And that night, as I was crying in that bathroom, in that trailer, I really thought about, I just want to go to sleep and not wake up. And I actually looked at the medicine cabinet and thinking if I had something I could just take to go to sleep and not wake up. And then the next thing that happens is I heard those little slippers coming, and I could hear them sliding on the floor. And it was Alan, and it was Jason, and then Willie Jess. Alan said, Mom, don't cry anymore. He said, God's gonna take care of us. And it was like, all of a sudden, I thought, those 3 little souls, and that's what they were, what would happen? If something happened to me, what would happen to them? I would leave them with a drunk, you know? I mean, it was like a light. You turned on the light. I just said, God, help me. Just help me.
The next day, Kay went to a pastor.
He said to me, of all things was, Kay, do you think if you died right now that you'd go to heaven? And I said, by all means, I would fly there. I said, because I've lived with this drunk husband, and then it's 10 years, and my grandmother told me to fight for my marriage. I should have earned my way to heaven. That's what I told him. And then he said, well, do you have peace? Do you have this? Do you have that? And I was like, now that's the problem. I don't have any of that stuff. When he told me the gospel, shared the gospel with me, then I realized I can't earn my way to heaven. Only Jesus did that. He earned it for me. I have to go through him. But you know what? When I did put my faith in him, and I did confess him as my Lord and Savior, and then I was baptized, I knew then that I had help, that he was living in me.
Kay shared her new faith with Phil. He called her a holy roller and kicked her and their 3 sons out of their home. Kay moved into an apartment, but instead of being angry, she believed God for the best.
What I did, this is more important than any lesson you'll ever learn. I told my kids, your dad has a good heart, but the devil is controlling him right now. The devil is living inside. One day I told my boys, I said, the devil will be gone. I said, but for now, don't hate your dad. You hate the devil. My kids and I prayed for their dad to find Jesus.
3 months later, Kay was at work when she saw Phil in the parking lot, sitting inside his truck.
Just big tears were rolling down his eyes. And he said, I can't eat, I can't sleep. I've got to have my family back. I won't drink anymore. I'm through. And I said, Phil, you said that before. You said that several times before. I said, you can't do it by yourself. You need somebody. And he said, are you talking about God? And I said, yes. And he said, I don't know how to find him.
Kay introduced Phil to her pastor, and the 2 men talked for several hours. The next day, Phil, then 28, went to church where he gave his life to God and was baptized. Kay and the boys were there when it happened.
And you know what? Those little boys were so happy, and I looked, and those tears, and I was crying. It was the beginning of the new life, the new Phil.
Shortly afterward, Phil and Kay had their 4th son. Phil began going to church, teaching Bible studies, and even Sunday school. He told everyone he met about the Savior who gave him a second chance. Decades later, his son Jace talked about how God used Phil to lead hundreds to Christ. Then, he talked about his mom and just how special she is to their family.
He said, now I want to tell you something. You wouldn't have had any of that, nothing, if it hadn't been for my mom. Nothing. You wouldn't know about Jesus right now. But it was my mom's courage to stay with a hard marriage and that stand by that commitment. So she's my first most courageous person. Isn't that good? Now see, I made it this whole time and didn't cry, but you know, it was so true. I know it was, but God pulled me through. And a grandmother.
In 2013, on the day of Kay's and Phil's 48-year anniversary, their sons and daughters-in-laws threw them a surprise wedding vow renewal.
From the time I was 14 years old, I loved you. I loved you when we were poor and you were not so nice. Now you're really nice and kind. And all I can say about that is, I'm not going anywhere.
That's good to know.
I will love you forever.
You are my best friend, and I love you dearly, and I'm going to be with you for the long haul until they put me in the ground. Good?
Perfect. He is my hero. He always refers to me as his best buddy. But it's like we're just together.
Now, what is the one thing that you want people to know about you?
You know, it's so funny because when we were asked to speak one time, the preacher told me, he said, you know what I think about when I see you? And I said, what? And he said, you stand by your man. And he said, through everything, you stood by your man. You told God you would, and you did. So maybe that's it.
You did. And now look at the fruit of it.
I know.
Your children, their wives, your grandchildren. What a legacy.
Well, I had told God and I told my family, if we ever forget where we came from, I pray we lose it all. That we just go right back to where we belong if we're going to lose it. Because you don't want to sit here and think this is our life from now on. It may or may not be how long, I don't know. But I want to be able to go right back and not miss a beat. I want that for my kids.
My family has many times enjoyed turning on the TV set and watching the Duck Dynasty gang, the family, the whole crew. And I think about, as I listen to Miss Kay talk, the fact that all of that could have been lost. It really could have been lost. You know, God's got a good plan. He's got a good plan for every one of us. Marriage is hard. It's very hard. Two very different people coming together, going through difficulties in life. But boy, when you work it through, when you walk it through together, when you move through those struggles, growing and being refined by each other, look at the blessing. Doesn't mean it wasn't tough along the way. You know, both Kay and Phil made the same mistake most of us do. Even when we've been raised up in church and we've got just enough knowledge to think we're okay, you know, they tried to do it on their own. We were not created to do it on our own. Jesus said that He's the vine, we are the branches, and He said, apart from me, you can do nothing, nothing. And yet we live with this idea that somehow we can pull it off, we can do it on our own, we can make ourselves happy, we can be satisfied. So often we lose everything that's good along the way, and by the time we learn the lesson, it's gone. If you're struggling with your marriage today, I want to encourage you to do what they did, to come to Christ and to say, I not only can't do this on my own, I don't want to do this on my own. You see, marriage is a God idea. One man, one woman in a garden with God. That was it from the beginning, and you can have that in your life. It may seem impossible today. There may be struggles that confront you. It's never too late. It's never too bad. It's never over. Trust God in the place that you're at, but be the first one to change. Let God change you first, and then He'll use you in your relationship with your husband, with your wife, with your kids, whatever your scenario might be. Don't do it on your own. Humble yourself before the living God. You can pray right now and do that. You see, first you got to take care of you before you take care of your marriage. So right now, just pray with me and say, Jesus, you did pay it all for me. I don't have to walk through this on my own. You've already paid the price. My job is to connect with you, to let you come into me, to be hungry for more of you, to walk with you day by day, to surrender everything I am and all that I have. So today, that's what I'm doing. Coming to you, Jesus, saying, yes, I want it all. I want everything you have to give me. And in return, I'm giving you all. And then I'm asking you, God, to heal my marriage, to use me in the midst of this. Change me, teach me, touch me, heal my home, heal my kids. God, show us how to live for you. In Jesus' name. Now that prayer is the beginning, so what do you do now? What do you do now? We've got a wonderful little packet we'd like to send to you. It's free. It's called A New Day, and in this packet is information on how do you, not your spouse, not your kids, how do you walk out a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? We want to send this to you. It's free. If you are struggling in your marriage, we've got a great little pamphlet called Love and Marriage, and we'll send both of those out to you. Even the phone call's free. It's 1-800-759-0700. Start with God today and find the amazing adventure and journey He'll take you on. You won't regret a second of it. Call now. Gordon?
Well, still ahead, a top cop who wasn't one at all.
We began to set guys up. We would pull them over, and we would handcuff them, and we would take their drugs or their money.
Watch what happens when the real police show up later on our show.
Welcome back to the 700 Club. Tornadoes ripped through western Illinois yesterday. Watch several funnels form as this multi-vortex storm rips through Warren County, southwest of Chicago. The town of Cameron, with a population of 600 people, took a direct hit. So far, no reports of casualties there. Operation Blessing is providing shelter and building homes for orphans in Nepal. 64 children lost their home when a deadly earthquake destroyed their orphanage last April. Operation Blessing is providing temporary shelter while teams rebuild the orphanage. And you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to their website at ob.org. Gordon and Terry are back with more of the 700 Club right after this.
As a young single mom trying to finish school, Flissy often had a hard time putting food on the table until she got help from a